Hello, welcome to Business Week, the program that brings you top business stories that made the headlines during the course of this week, including special news features, market data, interviews, and much more. Welcome to the show. Well, here's the highlight of the biggest stories we tracked for you over the course of this week. On the local front, the federal government has directed the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority to source $200 million for settlement of International Court of Arbitration in Paris award in favor of the Chinese firm Sunrise Power and Transmission Company Limited. Nigeria's Purchasing Managers Index rose to 55.4 in the month of July from 53.6 index points in June. Nigeria's private sector began the second half of the year on a positive footing as it continues this run of expansion that began in July 2020. In the bond market now, the Debt Management Office has announced an offering for the federal government of Nigeria's savings bond at 1,000 naira per unit, targeting retail investors with a guaranteed interest payment. On the international front, Western Australia is preparing to take a bigger slice of the booming global battery market, forecast to grow about $115 billion by the year 2030 as it moves beyond mining lithium and nickel into chemical processing. In Asia, growth in China's services sector accelerated last month, although the spread of the COVID-19 Delta variant across the country threatens to undercut the recovery in the world's second biggest economy. The Caxton Market Services Purchasing Managers Index rose to 54.9 index points in July, the highest since May, and up from 50.3 index points the previous month. The 50-point mark separates growth from contraction on a monthly basis. And now looking at the global currency market, the US dollar steadied after having lost value against Japanese yen and Swiss franc, as questions about slowing US economic growth and the COVID-19 Delta variant challenge risk appetite. Twitter Corporation's co-founder Jack Dorsey says the corporation will purchase Buy Now Pay Later pioneer Afterpay Limited for $29 billion, creating a global transaction giant in the biggest buyout of an Australian firm. Well, it's now time to bring you special packages prepared by our correspondents. Now, in this first report, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation wants a quick end to unhealthy working relationships between chief executive officers and boards of ministries, departments and agencies in the country. He made this known during an induction ceremony for chairmen, chief executive officers and governing boards of some agencies in Abuja. Lara Folayo has the details.
An induction ceremony for governing boards and CEOs of the Federal Character Commission, Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, as well as the Nigeria Electricity Management Agency. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation is represented here. He emphasizes the need for a greater working relationship amongst the participants.
Where there are conflicts, the rules will settle those the provisions of the law are there to settle those issues. Yes, some people may misinterpret the provisions of the law in respect to the appointments of board members, but they are very, very distinct. They are very clear. And government is not taking it lightly with those who conflict the rules. The rules are properly and clearly defined.
This meeting is to deepen the chief executives and governing board members' understanding of new policies, processes and procedures introduced into the country's governance system. It became necessary because the CEOs and governing board members are most times appointees without prior internal knowledge of the organization's workings.
You remember there was a chief executive that was removed and the board dissolved. You remember there are some board members that were suspended. Some are being suspended. Investigations being carried out on their activities. So I think government is is using carrots and stick to encourage people to work, and where you violate, let down rules and regulations.
Running a government is a team sport, and it is essential that all team members, whether in management or on the board, understand the role of governance and what constitutes effective governance. Good boards have become bad boards, and bad boards become good boards on the strength of the initiative, drive, vision, and commitment brought into the organization by the CEOs.
And in this next report now, the Customs Strike Force Zone A has intercepted containers of unprocessed timber wood valued at hundreds of millions of naira, among other contraband goods. Now, the strike force says it is targeting its anti-smuggling onslaught against economic saboteurs who defy the extant export and import prohibition list. TVC News correspondent Ifeanyi reports.
Nigeria's government had outlawed the export of unprocessed wood and its allied products. But these containers of timber wood, already cut and packed, would have been exported from the nation's seaports if operatives of the Strike Force Team Zone A had not impounded them. The coordinator of the team says that it contravenes sections of the Customs and Excise extant laws, noting that the cumulative duty paid value of the seized wood and other contraband goods is more than 664.5 million naira.
If you allow this felling of woods to continue, it will advance desert encroachment in no time. So we want to stop that so that the environment itself, the ecological issues will now have to be checked. So the Nigeria Customs Service does not exist alone for seizures of imports. We equally exist to ensure that government physical policies are adhered to strictly.
Speaking on other import infractions, he categorically stated that importation of footwears are absolute prohibitions. He warned that plans are in place to track contraband goods at the seaports using advanced manifest.
Footwear, shoes, foreign shoes, other than sports shoes, are absolutely prohibited from imports. We have more than enough to produce high quality of footwear in this country. The hide skin is here, the manpower is here, and the quality is there. As I just said, as a country, we have the resources, and as a country, we have the capacity to do something better than this.
And now with those reports, we delve into the feature of the show today, looking at analysis of 1 week after since the Central Bank of Nigeria announced the discontinued sale of FOREX to broad exchange operators, efforts to ease the new influx banks will face, and also the fate of broad exchange operators going forward. We have details of this and much more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Many thanks for still staying with us. Let's now deal with the crux of today's discourse. We'll start with a report following Monday's commencement of the Central Bank of Nigeria's directive to deposit money banks to sell foreign exchange to customers for invisibles such as basic travel allowance, PTA, medical and tuition. The Apex Bank had assured members of the banking public that the CBN will monitor the commercial banks to ensure they meet the legitimate FOREX demands of customers. The bank also stated that it dismissed speculations of plans to convert foreign exchange and domiciliary accounts of customers into naira. The CBN also notes that it has put in place monitoring mechanisms to guarantee the seamless sale of foreign exchange to customers who support their request with relevant documentation. The governor also stated that the CBN has extracted the commitment of the banks through the chief executive officers. The customers with legitimate requests will not be turned back. In addition to that, the Central Bank of Nigeria is also getting thumbs up from some civil society groups over the Apex Bank's decision to stop the sale of FOREX to broad exchange operators in the country. An umbrella body of civil society organizations spearheaded by Melissa Godwin says that they will embark on an advocacy program to explain to Nigerians the immense benefits of this policy and resist moves by broad exchange operators to swing the narrative in their favor with false information, fake data, unsubstantiated conclusions, and unrelated analogies. The group insists that the ban on sale of FOREX to BDCs is necessitated by their dubious and unwholesome practices, adding that the operators have gone beyond their primary role of being retail dealers to now wholesale dealers of foreign exchange.
Nigeria until today was the only country in the world where the central bank sells forex directly to BDCs. Is it not even strange that we waited this long before joining the rest of the world? Should this bold step not be generally applauded rather than being condemned? Is anyone afraid that the CBN is doing the right thing? Should sponsored opinions to stop the effective implementation of this new policy be allowed to determine the narrative of this issue? These are questions we must ask ourselves.
Meanwhile, deposit money banks in the country have started wooing customers to purchase the dollar following the new directive announced by the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele. Now, at the last Monetary Policy Committee meeting, the banks will set up teller points within their banking halls to attend to the forex needs of customers. Some customers received emails from the respective banks informing them about the resumption of sales of personal or business travel allowance. The CBN has also asked banks to publicize the locations of the designated branches and make necessary arrangements to sell forex to customers in cash and or electronically. In a similar development, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria also says it's strongly in support of the recent move by the Central Bank of Nigeria to discontinue the sale of forex to BDCs. Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, in a statement titled and also signed by the Director General, Olusegun Kadiri, also stated that the directive of the CBN on BDCs corroborated with its view and may also help address the inefficient activities of operators in the BDC market. According to Mr. Olusegun Kadiri, MAN has so far made various submissions on the need for the CBN to collapse various FX windows into a single official window, adding that a single FX window will eliminate the excesses of middlemen, save the value of the naira, and also allow for available FX to be allocated productively using the official banking protocols. Now, joining me via Skype to discuss this and much more, I have public finance and policy analyst Olusegun Elemo to discuss this. Thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, it's been a week since the move by the Central Bank of Nigeria discontinuing foreign exchange sale to broad exchange operators in the country. The CBN simultaneously also released a total of $200 million to all commercial banks in the country as part of efforts to meet dollar demand for legitimate end users in the country. In a sum, what do you make of this move and the mixed reactions that have trailed the directive so far?
I assume that that decision or the direction that the CBN has decided to take now is long overdue, and there's been so much pressure on our foreign reserve. There's been so much pressure on our currency, the fiat money, and the market has experienced high volatility in recent time, and that volatility then was aggravated by the COVID situation. Recall that the price of crude oil also crashed throughout the whole of 2020, and we're just experiencing recovery in that regard. So the pressure actually had been much on the central bank as well as the governor of the central bank. I believe that the governor with his team have been looking for a way to really deal with the situation, but you would agree with me that the BDC operators haven't really helped. I mean, that's a fact. We need to tell ourselves the truth. The CBN governor has accused them of diverting FX allocations to them, of also funneling these monies through those individuals or entities promoting terrorism in the country, as well as money laundering activities. So I think that it was very important that the CBN really assess the situation, evaluate it critically, and look at what's best option it could take at this very moment. And I think this is the best time CBN can actually, or perhaps maybe this is the last best time CBN can take a move to rescue the situation.
Now, do you think we have strong frameworks to checkmate the same complaints we had with BDCs? And what's the tendency? Same wouldn't happen with commercial banks, even though the Central Bank of Nigeria says that such cannot occur.
I don't think that we are not going to experience some related activities that the BDCs have been accused of with the financial service sector, with the banks. I believe that there could be more stringent monitoring mechanism with CBN playing oversight role on the banks than with the BDCs. The banks, for instance, they have strong capital reserve. Their customer base is huge. They accept deposits every now and then, and they're doing businesses. So they really can, they really cannot put their business on the line in relation to $20,000, $40,000, $50,000, FX allocation. So I believe that we're still going to have some elements of, sharp practices with the banks, but not as much as we've experienced with the BDCs. So with that regard, and I feel that if the CBN is able to implement its own mechanism, implement it religiously, then it can bring it to the very barest minimum. As such, we're going to have very transparent and accountable FX, management policy. But if the CBN then, continues to be lascivious and then relax, and it's not monitoring who and who is getting FX from the banks on a daily basis, which BVN is being used, which, travel itinerary is being used, and monitor all of this and check it, very well, and ask questions where, the CBN is in doubt of anything, then we're going to have, bank executives then begin to do the same thing that BDC operators have done for a long time.
Banks are now expected to set up teller points within their banking halls to attend to the forex needs of customers. Do you think this is enough? Although some customers have already received emails from their respective banks informing the customers about the resumption of sales of personal or business travel allowance. For example, a colleague of mine went to one of the banks and then, according to the manager on duty, I said then, the policy is still fresh, hence they didn't have any dollar to sell to him. How do we deal with this situation, especially with the setting up of teller points and ensuring that all customers get the dollars or forex as requested upon presentation of relevant documentation?
Well, I think that, for instance, many banks, even before now, have always had teller points for FX transactions, FX related, whether it's deposit or withdrawal, or you need travel allowance or business travel allowance or any of that. But not all of the banks have had that teller points. But the CBN now instructing all bank branches across the country to set up teller points is a good one. I don't think that's an all in all. That will solve all the problem. I don't think so. I think the management of each bank, the management of each bank centrally now, and then at each branch of the banks, need to now, really be honest and be accountable, to this policy, and ensure that they do not, because even before now, you see that, even banks, get involved. They connive with BDC operators to do all of these sharp practices that has affected our fiat money for a long time. So I think that it is the accountability to the policy that is very, very important. But with regards to what you said, I've received the emails from all of the banks that I operate account with, and they've requested that if I have need for FX, whether business travel or personal travel, that I should approach any of the branches. And I believe that I don't think that the banks are in shortage of the volume right now. I don't think so. Crude oil is selling for $70 per barrel today. The 2021 budget was benchmarked at $40 per barrel. So we have a $30 differential as at today. And I believe that the CBN actually has the volume, and that's why the Apex Bank felt, well, this is the best time, or perhaps, like I said earlier, this is the last best time to deal with this issue once and for all. Many people have even said that Nigeria is the only country where you have BDC operators, that has now formed a major stakeholder in the FX market policy. You rarely have this in other countries where, unregulated or very slightly regulated market have now become major stakeholder in determining what happens to the fiat money. So I think that the CBN, has got this right if it continues to evaluate the policy on a regular, because that's one thing about public policy. You can have a policy direction, and if you don't evaluate constantly and readjust and tweak it and know what is wrong, what needs to be further put in place and all of that, then you have a very terrible outcome at the end of the day.
And now the exchange rate value of the naira against the greenback and other global currencies has been a major issue. Following the announcement of the CBN, we saw the naira hit almost 600 naira before trading at about 520 naira and then 500 naira. But what measures do you think we can further explore in the short to medium term to balance the trading pattern, eliminating the excesses of middlemen permanently?
Well, I think that the temporary increase that we saw was just some immediate reaction to the market and to the policy of the central bank. And it was not going to be sustainable. But then, at 500 naira to $1, it's still not where we should have it. I think that what the CBN can begin to look at now, in addition to the policy that has now been put in place, is to understand that, for instance, the crude oil revenue from crude oil that we currently have, and they're able to inch this policy on. I mean, this policy of the central bank is primarily on the revenue from crude oil. So, because if CBN feels that it has enough volume of dollar right now to be able to intervene in the market, and that's fantastic. So I feel that what the CBN needs to do in addition to that is to look at, for instance, the energy transition direction that is currently, going on globally, and see how it affects, the crude oil price, and understand that whatever we have with crude oil price today is temporal. It's not going to be permanent for a long time. So we really need to build, some FX muscles. And how do we build that? To divest the economy away from crude oil, and really strengthen the manufacturing sector, the technology sector, and see how much of foreign exchange we can earn from these other sectors to be able to provide some absorb the shock that we'll probably experience in the future. Again, is also that we might not necessarily eradicate the BDC operators completely. I agree that some licenses need to be withdrawn, and then, like the CBN governor mentioned, that the bank has stopped, processing. I mean, it is sad that we moved from 70 BDCs just a few years ago, and we're now about 5,000 BDCs operators. And the bank said that, it continues to receive not less than 500 applications on a monthly basis for people who want to operate BDCs. And I mean, really, it just shows that there are many, Nigerians, who are willing to take advantage, and they don't care what happens to the currency. So I feel that the Apex Bank needs to withdraw some licenses. Some people that have been identified to be involved in sharp practices, it needs to withdraw those licenses, and then limit, perhaps maybe put some more stringent and elevate the conditions to operate a BDC, so that just like the way we had it, years ago when we recapitalized the banking sector, and you realize that we had to shrink the number of banks operating in the country. I think that's the same system that needs to be put in place, so that we can monitor few BDCs and we can place stronger oversight on them than having many, across the market which we cannot monitor.
Lastly, what new twists do you see playing out with our FX market and policy direction of the federal government, especially for the imports of raw materials for the manufacturing sector?
I think that the CBN at a point may need to look, at some extra policy measures for the manufacturing sector, perhaps, and that's why I said that the Apex Bank needs to continue to evaluate this policy. and know whether it is serving the purpose it's meant to serve. Like for instance, now you may realize that some people who are in manufacturing, who are in business, who legitimately need FX for business transactions. If they don't have easy access to getting this FX to facilitate their businesses, then the CBN would then need to look at some extra measures, some policy tweak that can serve the business interest purposes. I think that may happen. But again, like I said, for the BDC operators, that's what I said. I think that some licenses need to be withdrawn. We need to shrink that market. We need to shrink the operators in that space so that we can have, oversight, stronger oversight on few that will, be left in that market.
Thank you very much for your time on the show today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Olusegun Elemo.
Thank you for having me.
Well, just before we go, here are graphic details of the latest capital importation data as prepared by the National Bureau of Statistics. And that's it on this edition of Business Week. Many thanks for watching so far. Do enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm David Alabi. Bye for now.